My name is Gavin Evans, and this is my review of the 2022 Disney remake of Pinocchio. And yes, I have to be that specific because there's so many Pinocchio movies out and coming out. Like we got one a few years ago with Roberto Benigni, which was really boring, but the makeup effects in that movie were incredible. We had an animated one last year with Pauly Shore doing the voice. We have this one, and then we've got the Guillermo del Toro stop motion one, and that one actually looks great. So there's a lot of Pinocchio out right now, and this is a movie that I was not expecting to be good. I don't like the Disney live action remakes. There's a few that I enjoy, like Pete's Dragon, Cinderella, and most recently Cruella, but for the most part, they're just lesser versions of great stories, and there's some really atrocious ones out of the bunch. But I still went into this movie expecting to have a fun time with it in the same way I had a fun time with Cats. Cats is an abysmal movie. It is so weird and just, well, cats. So I was hoping that I would get a similar experience with this movie, but unfortunately I did not. This movie is one giant bore and it's a complete disaster in so many ways. I don't even know where to begin with this movie, but let's begin talking about the story, and I absolutely love the original Pinocchio. Like, you got yourself a really strong story about a boy facing the temptations of the world and still coming out rosy in the end, and you've got yourself some really great disturbing moments. So I love that movie, and I'm watching the same story play out here. I'm watching the same scenes, but it's just a lesser version of it. You know, one of the worst movies ever made is The Lion King, the 2019 remake. That movie is abysmal and atrocious and just a complete disaster. And you're watching the animated Lion King and you get I Just Can't Wait to Be King, and it's filled with life and colors and personality. And then you see the live action one and it's just completely void of any bit of personality or life. And that's the same case with this movie. You're watching the same scenes, but this time with just the least bit of care put into it. And it shows through the visual effects. Like, I think it's time for a bigger discussion about modern visual effects because over time you'd expect them to get better, but they're actually getting worse. You know, there have been lots of reports out recently about how awful Marvel treats the visual effects workers, and it's really starting to show. You know, so many of these studios are pumping out movie and TV show non-stop, and obviously they're biting off more than they could chew because they're really starting to look like shit. You know, I love Doctor Strange 2 a lot more than most people, but some of the visual effects in that movie are really bad. Thor Love and Thunder looks cheap as hell. Like, the visual effects in that movie aren't good at all. And then you get to this movie, made by one of the biggest studios ever, I should say, and it looks like shit. And I don't blame the people working on the visual effects. I blame the studio and the people behind this movie. Like, there's just no excuse for how bad this movie looks. There's an uncanny valley where just nothing looks real. The visual effects don't merge with the background in any way. Everything just stands out and it's just very unsettling to watch. You know, especially in the very end of the movie where it's focused up on Pinocchio's face and it looks like some cheap 3D animation from like the early 90s at best. Like, it doesn't look good at all. There's no sense of texture, there's no sense of depth. It's just flat and ugly. And it's just like, why would you release it like this? Like, it just shows that they don't care about this movie. And this movie is filled with CGI. The environments are CGI. The characters are CGI. Just everything is CGI. And it's just so ugly and fake to look at. And it just doesn't work in any way. Like, I am not exaggerating when I say this is one of the ugliest movies I've ever seen in my entire life. And there's no excuse for it. So honestly, these studios need to start making yes and make sure their quality is up where it should be. Like, go back to the 2000s. The Pirates of the Caribbean movies, the first three, I absolutely love, and the visual effects in those movies are better than anything we get now. You look at Avatar, and that movie looks incredible. And there's still some movies that look great, like Dune, but for the most part, visual effects are going on a downward spiral, so they need to fix that up. And not just that, this is also one of the worst sounding movies I've ever seen. I'm not good at pointing out ADR. I think a few years ago it was Night School, the Kevin Hart movie, and everybody was complaining about the ADR for that movie, and I didn't notice it once. So I don't pick up on that kind of things all too often. And I'm just watching this movie, and I picked up on it like once a minute. Like, it is unspeakably bad. And some of the sound is just way too cried and just... this movie is just terribly made in every single conceivable way, and it's directed by Robert Zemeckis, who was once a fantastic director. You look at the way he got his start, he was on the path to being the next Spielberg. He had Back to the Future, which everyone agrees is one of the greatest movies ever made. He also did Back to the Future Part 2 and 3, which, if you ask me, are two of the most underrated movies ever made. He did Death Becomes Her, which, if you haven't seen that movie, is fantastic. I love it. He did Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which is critically acclaimed, and it's fine. He did Castaway, which is an amazing movie. He did Forrest Gump, which I still really like. He also did two more underrated movies in the past decade, in Flight and The Walk, which I really enjoyed. But what's happened to this guy? He did The Witches a couple years ago, and that movie was awful, and now he does this. Like, what happened? Like, the guy has talent. The guy can be great when he wants to be, and I just... the fact that you watch Who Framed Roger Rabbit and the animation in that movie feels more a part of that world than anything in this movie, and that came out a long time ago, just... I don't know, like, he was a great director, and I hope he gets to be a great director again one day, because this isn't the Robert Zemeckis I love. But let's also talk about the cast now, first with Benjamin Evan Hensworth, and he's a kid. I don't want to be too mean. I'll say I don't think he was good, and I found the character to be just very grating. I was hoping someone would pick him up and just put him in a wood chopper, just couldn't stand him. You've got Tom Hanks, and wow, I really enjoy Elvis, but I'll admit that he's not good in that movie, and now you've got this performance. He's also on a downward spiral. Like, what is he doing? The guy's a great actor, and he's not good in this movie. You've got Giuseppe Battiston, who plays Stromboli, who doesn't have enough to do, and I don't think he was good. You've got Luke Evans as the coachman, and he doesn't have enough to do, and he's not very good. You've got Cynthia Erivo, who has a lovely voice, but I do think she was miscast here. You've got Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who I love as an actor, but my goodness, what is he doing here? Like, it sounds like he's putting on a terrible Mickey Mouse impersonation the entire time. Terrible work from him. Keegan-Michael Key, visual effects aside, I actually think he does the best job. I actually think he brings Honest John to life really well if you just keep your eyes closed. Lorraine Bracco, who plays Sophie the Seagull, is unbearably annoying. I hated her. Terrible, terrible, terrible voice performance. And Llewyn Lloyd, who plays Lampwick, is also really bad. So, cast is awful. Story is awful. The directing and the visuals and the sound is awful. And oh, I didn't even mention the ending. They changed up the ending a little bit, and it's bad. Look, there are a couple moments where I was able to laugh at this movie and have fun, but those moments were way too few and far between. Not enough to compensate for just how slow and boring this movie is. And you add on to just how terrible almost every aspect this movie is on top of that. I was hoping that this could be the next Cats, and unfortunately, it's just another atrocious Disney live-action remake. They need to stop doing these. The trailer for The Little Mermaid came out today, and I have zero interest in that movie. I'm looking forward to the Peter Pan movies, all by David Lowery, but after that, time to wrap it up, call it quits, and stop the seas, because between this, Mulan, The Lion King, Alice Through the Looking Glass, those are 4 of the worst movies ever made. So I'm going to go ahead and give Pinocchio a 0.5 out of 10. at least we've got the Guillermo del Toro one coming out in just a couple months. That one will be great, and I can't wait for that movie. But anyways, did you watch the new Pinocchio? I hope not. Oh, you know what? One more thing I forgot to mention is there's so many pop culture references that just don't belong in this movie. And also on top of that, there's some things you can get away with in animation and not in live action. And I'm just saying that Geppetto felt a bit more creepy in this movie. But anyways, back to what I was saying. Have you seen Pinocchio? If so, let me know what you thought about it in the comments down below. Make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe. Stay tuned for some more videos soon. And Gavin, out.